welcome to the Fandom Show, the podcast where we learn about fantastic fandoms by talking to our favorites about their favorites. I am Kaya Green.
And I am Stephanie Malik.
And today we are talking emphatically about one of the most famous fantasy writers that you may never have read. It is Terry Pratchett.
Ooh. Someone requested this ages ago, being like, please do a Terry Pratchett episode.
Absolutely.
And then we managed to find a fan, which is great.
Rightfully so, this was requested, because I feel like this is a massive fandom that I think passes a lot of people by. Like, unlike Tolkien, which I think a lot of people have encountered, or say, I don't know, that lady that writes about witches and wizards in England, whatever her name is. This is not one that I think a lot of people stumble on if they're not fantasy nerds.
I think that's true. I think it also has to do with, our general age bracket. I think this writer was very prolific in the 70s and 80s. And, I don't know about you, I wasn't reading a lot of deep fantasy back when I was 2 yet. But I think it just happens that, perhaps in our generation, unless you are a fantasy aficionado or someone who is actively leaning into that genre, you might not encounter this writer.
Absolutely. I know I didn't read much of his stuff when I was a kid, and I've only actually started reading more of it as I've gotten older, much like Ursula K. Le Guin.
Yep.
I'm very excited to talk about this because this guy is huge. He's a foundational writer.
Kaya, what do you know about Terry Pratchett?
So I know that Terry Pratchett has written an unbelievable number of books.
Yep.
A Stephen King level number of books.
Yes.
I actually don't know the exact number on Stephen King, but a lot. I guess a lot is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
And I know that he's responsible for creating the Discworld series, which on its own has like 40 or 50 books in it.
Yeah.
And that is most of what I know. I also know that he was a frequent collaborator with Neil Gaiman, unfortunately.
Yep.
And created Good Omens, which is how I think I first heard about him.
It is, because that's what I know about Terry Pratchett.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite books of all time is Good Omens. And when we started dating, I was like, you must read this book.
Yes.
I don't care what else you read. You told me I had to read American Gods, and I told you had to read Good Omens.
Yes, absolutely.
And they were like foundational, important things to make sure we were on the same page.
Yes.
As a matter of speaking.
And that was that you really won me over with that because Good Omens is a rock solid book. It's
fantastic.
So good.
And then, I know that Discworld, it's a world on the back of a turtle.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I know.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of knowledge that I clearly have about this author. But do you know who knows a lot about Terry Pratchett?
I have no idea. Tell me.
Well, we're going to cut that. Brett Seivwright, who is a writer and performer and professional tarot reader. He and his platonic life partner, Nikki Haggart, have just launched their own podcast called The Hexperts, where Brett talks about witch folklore and magical practices, and Nikki forces Brett to explain pop culture topics he knows nothing about. Sounds a bit like our house sometimes. Welcome, Brett. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. What a delight.
So excited to have you here.
I don't even know where to start because already just in you talking about what you respectively know about Terry Pratchett, you've covered so many things that I'm like, oh, gotta comment on that. Oh, gotta talk about this. Oh, gotta
It's okay.
Absolutely. It's like every time we go into one of these episodes, it's like, oh, what will we talk about for an hour? And 5 minutes in, it's like an hour won't be enough.
Oh, yeah. So to start, I love that we're diving in acknowledging that Terry is one of these giants that nobody has heard of.
Yep.
Because it's such a peculiar phenomenon where he was... I think, I forget how long it ran for, but he was the best-selling, UK author for a long time. Until a certain lady who writes about witches and wizards and
She Who Shall Not Be Named.
She Who Shall Not Be Named came onto the scene, you know? But before that, it was Terry. Also, he has so while we're on the topic of that, because there's some fun little controversy there where I get the impression Terry didn't like She Who Must Not Be Named.
Is that right?
Very much. There's an interview, she was and probably is very disparaging about the fantasy genre and said something just ridiculous at some point to the effect of I never considered, insert name of books here, fantasy.
Is that right?
Yeah. And Terry is, and this is one of the things I love so much about him, is so anti-pretentiousness and pro-genre fiction.
Oh, I love that.
Yes, he said there's a thing he said that was, there's no such thing as magical realism. That's just fantasy written by someone you went to university with, you know? Yeah, and so after she made said comment, somebody, knowing that Terry was an avid defender of the fantasy genre, turned this towards him. And he just very simply said, well, you think the Wizards and Dragons would have tipped her off?
Excellent burn.
Yeah.
Excellent burn.
He's superb.
Okay, so let's pretend that somebody has never heard of Terry Pratchett before. Gotcha. How would you explain Terry Pratchett as an individual and as a writer?
As an individual, quirky, grumpy humanist who just wants everybody to have a good and decent life is that's the Terry that I know, or the Terry that I think comes through the page when I read him, and is the reason I fell so madly in love with him. And I think, insofar as his writing is concerned, if you're a lover of fantasy, if you're a lover of mythology, and if you're a lover of pithy comments and comedy, then this is the place to live. You know, he often said that he treats folklore and mythology and existing materials the way that a lumberjack treats a forest. And also said I don't come up with things, I steal them and reshape them. Was very transparent about, this is me just splashing my Terry-ness. Ooh, what an unfortunate turn of phrase. But
not a quote, not a direct quote.
This is me putting the Terry Pratchett view on the things that he loves, or the things that that he was really fascinated by, and taking Discworld, of which there are 41 books.
There we go.
There we go. One of which was published posthumously. Within those books, you can see, which historical phenomenon, which scientific article, which thing he was sort of looking at any given point, that he then said, "Oh, I'm gonna put some fantasy on it." That's where I'm going now.
I love that. I find that delightful because so many authors do that. That is a normal part of being a writer, and some won't cop to it.
Yeah. Oh, and he was so transparent about it. He's got a book that's just Australia. He went to Australia on a book tour. Was like, I gotta write about this now, And in Witches Abroad, he another book tour. He was in New Orleans for the first time. He loved New Orleans. He loved
that makes sense.
I mean, how can you not?
Yeah.
What a magical place.
Yes.
And he took it and said I need to put New Orleans in the Discworld, And so we have this fairy tale kingdom that is simultaneously New Orleans, It's fantastic. Witches Abroad, it's one of my favorite ones.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it seems like he was a very creative person, not just within his writing, but also he was just very curious. Because from what I've read about him, he loved astronomy and computers and...
Absolutely. And that's a thing that he, that was sort of his bit of advice that he would give to aspiring writers, or specifically aspiring fantasy writers, is if you want to write fantasy, read everything but fantasy. Go and find other things that exist. You can put the fantasy on it later, kind of thing. He was so curious about the world, and he had such a devouring mind in this non-pretentious way. He never came out as anti-academia, but there is something... There are certain things that he has said or alluded to that really make it feel like he hates the institutionalization of learning or of education, And I think that comes through in the fact that he didn't go past high school, this was not a quote unquote educated man, and yet he knew more than anybody.
It was not a Professor Tolkien coming in and creating his whole legendarium of language.
Precisely.
It's a person who just loved the world and was curious about it, and then decided to add his own little Terry essence.
Exactly. That's
his teriyaki.
Oh no! I like it. I want it, but I think it should go away. I don't know.
Let's don't look it directly. Don't look it in the face. Don't look it in the face.
We're workshopping. No bad ideas and brainstorming.
We're just let's put on our blue sky hat right now.
We'll get to it by the end of the hour.
Okay.
What's your origin story? How did you get into Terry Pratchett?
Okay, so like a lot of kids, all I would read was fantasy. It was the only thing I was interested in. And I hit a wall like in the middle of high school. I want to say ninth grade-ish. I was, I went to school in Quebec, so like high school for us was 7 to 11,
Yes.
So like smack dab in the middle, ninth grade. I got tired of, not of Tolkien specifically, but of the Tolkien-inspired things where these worlds are very dour and serious, and it makes sense because largely fantasy deals with the the never-ending battle between good and evil, and that's heavy stuff.
Can be.
It can be, and so I got bored of it, and I don't remember how I found him. I don't remember how he came across my path, but I got my hands on one of the earlier Discworld books, Equal Rights, rights written as in a ritual,
Yeah, yes.
Beautiful.
He was very punny, in case you didn't know this about
The fact that I have, from all of this already, I'm like, this should be my favorite author in the world.
Possibly, yes.
He should be, I don't want to oversell this. He should be everyone's favorite author in the world, and I will die on this hill.
Please, sell it.
You don't have to die on the hill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The hill is alive with the sound of Pratchett.
I like that.
Add that one to the list.
Thank you. I'm workshopping it.
But so I read Equal Rights as the first one and just was enamored. It was jovial and it was light and it was smart. And his characters were so gripping because he didn't do the thing that a lot of authors do where the protagonist needs to be this kind of canvas wherein the reader can project themselves onto it. Speaking of Neil Gaiman, and I do think we need to talk about the Terry-Neil relationship afterwards.
We can,
It's
complex.
But because I have some thoughts on that one where I think that a certain man liked a certain other man more than that man liked him.
Ooh, interesting.
All this to say that, this thing of like having these really dull protagonists. And Terry said, no, I'm going to write people I've observed and strange people that I adore. And so we end up with these characters who none of us are like. And I find them so much more lovable because we're meeting these new people rather than, existing through the vacant perspective of a person who knows nothing about these worlds, which is another trope of fantasy that frankly drives me crazy is, we must have somebody who doesn't know this fantasy world because the reader doesn't know this fantasy world, so that way they can learn at the same time. And Terry said, no, fuck it. Granny Weatherwax has lived here for 80 years. Of course she knows the world. Yeah. They'll learn as they go. You know?
It's not that hard. They'll get it.
It's really not that hard,
Yeah.
That's a lot of trust to have in your audience. Which is great.
Yeah.
Because I think an audience usually rises to the occasion on things like that.
I would agree. They're there. They want to be there. They want to go along this journey with you. So
they're already picking up the book. They're already in there with you.
Yeah. So you read that, and then were you immediately I must read them all?
Boom, 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 boom. I didn't read anything else for I mean, at that time there must have been like 36 or 38 of the books. Only a few were published in my lifetime before he died. So I just read them all serially, and I think that's all I read for a straight year or two was Discworld.
Oh my God.
Even like to the point of like I'd read 5 new ones and then go, I need to read Wyrd Sisters again, and I like skip back kind of thing,
So you've done little loops basically going through it.
Absolutely, and like at this point, like because there are series within the series, and at this point I've read my favorite Pratchetts probably 10, 12 times.
Wow. Amazing.
Because they're fast. You finish them in 3 days flat. You
Yeah,
know,
really?
they're so. I think more than any other writer, he has such a cinematic way of writing where you get lost in the page and you're seeing it in front of you. And I describe it as if I've watched the movie, not as if I've read the book, And I think that makes it so easy to kind of get sucked in. And because he tricks you because he refuses to do chapters, which feels mean, but you don't notice, or I didn't notice anyway.
So did he just write straight through? Like there's no pauses in just...
There are pauses,
okay.
But it's not like like other authors, you can kind of gauge like, okay, this person clocks in like 10 to 15 pages a chapter kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's none of that with Terry. You might be reading 20 straight pages, and then there will be a bunch of vignettes that are half a page each, and then we resume. It's very whatever he was in the mood for that day.
I love that. So would you say like his writing style, if you had to describe his writing style, is it just kind of like whatever tickled his fancy at the time?
Basically, and he does say that he wrote that way. He describes the writing process as standing on a hill, over, a foggy valley, and you can see a tree poking up here, there, and there. But in order to find out what the actual lay of the land is, you have to go into the mist.
Oh, that's such a good description.
Isn't it?
Terry,
I feel
what
like
are you doing to us?
You can really measure a good fiction writer by the way they describe writing.
I so agree.
Because that's evocative.
Oh, it is. And like, I as somebody who writes myself, when I read, I was like, oh my God, I don't have to know the whole thing. I can just have 3 trees and figure out the rest.
That's like deeply comforting to me.
Right? And that's what he did. He said, when you read about his writing process, he wrote down what he knew and then filled in the gaps as they came to him, Yeah.
Which I recommend, like, at least in my writing process, it took me a long time to discover that method. But yeah, you don't need to know everything and you don't need to write it in order.
No, you don't.
And that is deeply useful.
Like, deeply useful, and also, at least for me, so not intuitive,
Yes.
Like, I'm a person who's like, well, no, if you're building a house, you start with the bricks on the bottom first, obviously, you know?
If you're telling a narrative, you have to go from the start to the finish.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is funny, because that's actually not how you build a house. You frame it first.
Well, goddamn, never mind. Okay.
No, I mean, it's funny, though. That is the way we think of things. But, like, things are generally done in stages. Anyway, this is not an episode
Welcome
about
to
writing.
How to Build a House and a Story. Here with your... No, I got nothing. So on the show, we've had conversations about, like, Tolkien or Ursula K. Le Guin. And they obviously have, like, motifs and themes that characterize their work. What would you say would make for a Terry Pratchett story?
Okay, if there's a few things and you throw them in a pot and you just let them seep into
Like a cauldron. You were explaining a cauldron to us before.
We were talking about cauldron. So we're cauldron brewing a Terry story here.
Yes,
so
yes.
Come with me if you will.
I'm in.
First thing, main thing, silliness. He was irreverent about everything. It was all a joke. It was all hysterical. It was all funny.
Very satirical as well, right?
So satirical, absolutely. And like such a combination of very I guess witty, what's the word I'm looking for? Like apropos, contemporary, subtle humor, dry.
Yeah.
And then sometimes mixed with just straight up fart jokes, Like there was, again, the man was so unpretentious. He was like, oh no, these are both funny. Like this is great.
Yeah.
We love a poop story, Like
Humans love a fart joke.
they love a fart. There was a running thing when like one of his characters eventually has a child, and this child's favorite book is The Wonderful World of Pooh. And so constantly we're hearing about this book that just this children's, like I picture one of the gold bound,
Oh, yeah.
one of those kids' books.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's that, except that it's like, and this is what the rhino poo looked like,
gosh.
Anyway, but so we got the silliness. And then ingredient 2 is rage. Terry was very aware of the state of certain injustices and certain nonsensicalities within the world, and he was mad about it, and it shows. And like not to make it more about me than about Terry, but that's something that stands out to me in his writing, just because like I'm a person who has like a very intimate early relationship with that sense of like this makes me mad, and I feel like other people aren't having mad the same way that I'm having mad, and seeing Terry kind of go, no, I'm mad too, and my characters are mad, and they're still good people, was kind of like, I don't know, a balm to me, because we treat anger as such an abhorrent emotion that, immediately leads to violence and despicable behavior.
Yeah.
And that's not the case,
Anger can be the first ingredient to change, to revolution, to like making something new from something old. Like rage can be positive.
Yeah.
Yes.
It doesn't just lead to hate, which leads to anger, which leads to the dark side. Or
Okay,
whatever the phrase is.
Lucas, George Lucas.
But it does often get categorized, speaking, with evil.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up, anger as this sort of transformative regent, just because that's generally what happens is people in the Discworld are living their life, and then something makes Granny Weatherwax mad, or it makes Sam Vimes mad, and then they follow the lead of that anger. And so you sort of feel the anger like a heartbeat in Terry's works, when like after whatever he's pursuing, this thing where he's going, this isn't right, and it needs to be made right or made better, And so I think it's silliness and it's anger and it's a love of humanity, you know? He had such a love for the quirky things, you know? And he was talking about human issues that were not being discussed at his time before they became issues, you know? Like transness. He's talking about transness and gender identity in his dwarves way before anybody else was talking about it.
What?
Yeah, because it's this thing where it's sort of a Tolkien joke that then became a reflection on gender roles and gender identity.
Oh, the dwarven women with beards.
Precisely. So all the dwarves have beards, except there are no female dwarves. That's the rule in Discworld. You're a dwarf, you're a man. And so he sort of has these jokes about like the delicate mating ritual of dwarves trying to figure out who they can procreate with. But then like in book like, I don't know, 13 or 14 of the series, we meet the first dwarf who says, actually, I'm a woman. And I'm going to wear heels, and I'm going to wear lipstick, and I'm going to keep my beard because that's a dwarf thing, not a woman thing, you know?
Facts.
And the whole dwarf world collapses. People are furious, you know, that like somebody would dare to go against the structure that has existed forever. And you read it and go, he saw into 2020 plus. He saw the way that this would come through, you know? And obviously he wasn't using words like trans. He wasn't, familiar with these identities. But there was still a part of him that was going, gender. We're kind of weird about that, aren't we? You know?
We are weird about it.
We're weird about it.
That's the best possible way to put it, too. We're weird about it.
And like that's I don't want to disturb his grave, but the one thing that I would necromantically revive him for is I want to sit him in a room with a certain author we've been alluding to, because I know he'd have some words, and I know they'd be good ones.
They'd be pithy and sharp and astute and delicious.
That's
right?
It. No nonsense Twitter essays, just 3 sentences undercutting everything, and he'd win, you know?
Oh, man.
Well, like his take on sort of modern issues. You were talking about this before we got here, about how he was an early adopter of computers. He used computers for a lot of his writing.
Which is kind of rare with a lot of sort of writers, specifically fantasy writers, who often get associated with the Tolkien kind of energy of things were better before.
Oh, you must use my typewriter. Everything
Technology
analog.
bad. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I was reading about how he spoke with
Bill
Gates about the idea of misinformation spreading online.
I don't know this story, so please tell me more about that.
Apparently, he was very concerned about it. Apparently, they had a conversation, and he was like, I'm fairly certain that this is going to be a tool for people to spread misinformation. I'm already seeing conversations being had where Holocaust denial is being brought up in the same breath as peer-reviewed history. And Bill Gates, and I think I read this, I can't source this, so this might
Check
be wrong.
out the Nerds letter. We'll credit it there.
Yeah. But Bill Gates in return was like, no, I don't think that'll be a problem. So I think Pratchett is known as one of the early visionaries over fake news.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Information was so precious to him, and intelligence was so precious to him that it does make sense to me that conversation happened, and that even though like I said, this is the first time hearing about it, that so tracks with the Terry that I know, or the Terry I've become accustomed to. Get on it, Bilius. Where are you fixing this?
All right. So obviously Terry's written over 70 books, which is friggin' wild. 41 in Discord series alone.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to crack into his work, where should they start? Is it at the beginning?
I mean, I would say no, and I think Terry would agree.
Okay.
When Terry started the Discworld, and when he actually let's skip Discworld, let's go to the kids' books, the Carpet People, and things like this that he was writing before that. He sorry, just gathering my thoughts.
That's okay.
He was writing for the joke. He was making fun sillies about the fantasy tropes that he adored. And you can in real time read his writing maturing, and him sort of realizing, oh, this is my career now. Oh, I get to do more than just the fun sillies. Oh, I can say what I want. So by the time you hit book 10, 11, you're starting to see these you still get your fun sillies. You're always going to get fun sillies with Terry.
Guaranteed.
But you also start to see these moments of like stark, brutal humanity coming through. Yeah, it's gorgeous. And so you get that in, you know, in Reaper Man, which is like the 11th or 12th book in the series, in a way that you won't with The Color of Magic and The Light Fantastic, which are the first 2 books. So I think it's less about starting at the beginning. I would say pick a series within the series. You know, like you've got the guards, you've got the wizards, you've got the witches. You know, and then there are various standalones. And the one that I would encourage people to start with, because it's my favorite, is the witches.
The witches?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
We just met, and I already feel like I know you. We're connected. It's fine.
May I hold your hand?
You may hold my hand,
Oh,
yes.
This is lovely. Thank you.
I love this. This is adorable.
As soon as you walked in, you're like, talked about Wicca. I was like, yeah, we're besties. We're besties.
But yeah, no, because I mean, the witches are. Listen, the witches are written for gay people. They're not, but they are. In that they're.
Aren't witches always for
I was
gay
going to
people?
say, as witches so often are.
As they are, but like these witches are the golden girls with magic powers. You know, it's a bunch of crotchety, nasty, sassy old ladies who have been friends for way too long, except that they are also the stewards of their communities who need to guard against both mundane and magical dangers. So it's perfect. It's brilliant. Granny Weatherwax is my favorite character ever written. Hard stop.
Is the first one the Wyrd sisters?
Technically, Equal Rights is the first one,
Equal
which
Rights.
is the one where we meet Granny Weatherwax. That being said, the first one where we meet all of the witches together, because they are a coven and there are multiple of them, is Wyrd Sisters.
Okay.
So yes, I would start with Wyrd Sisters.
Okay.
I think it's a great place to start, and then Witches Abroad, Lords and Ladies, Masquerade, and Carpe Jugulum. And those are
All these titles are great.
And that's your favorite sub-series of Discworld, I imagine.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Amazing.
Like we could do. I won't make you do this, but we could do an episode just about Pratchett's witches, and we'd be set.
Oh my god, I love this. Well, what is it besides the witch subject matter, which obviously is appealing? But what about that series would you say is the thing that you love the most?
So a few things. One, love a grouchy old lady.
Yes, I played D&D with you. And your D&D character is making so much sense now.
I was going to say, so we remember Tabitha. Anyway, but yeah, so like I love a grouchy old lady. I also within the Discworld, usually it's Terry taking, like I said, it's taking a fantasy thing and taking another thing he's fixated on and mixing them together. And the Witches series just so happens to include subject matter that I really enjoy outside of the fantasy world. In Witches Abroad is where we're seeing New Orleans, which is a place that I kind of am fixated on and love. In Lords and Ladies, we're talking about alien lore meets Midsummer Night's Dream, which is really cool, and elves and fairy folklore. Masquerade is straight up opera and musical theater.
It's just the Phantom?
It's yes, yes,
Amazing.
There is a phantom. That's a character. And
incredible.
Yes, it's brilliant. And then Carpe Jugulum, the last one is, fixated on the witches is vampires.
Of course.
Carpe
Yep.
Jugulum.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then they also feature in some of the books aimed at younger kids, right?
They do.
Like I know in We Free Men,
yes,
they
feature. There's sort of a second Witches series that emerges once Granny and Nanny and Magrat have retired. Well, not retired, but retired as protagonists. We meet Tiffany Aching, and now that we've kind of read these stories from the perspectives of the established ancient expert witches of the Discworld, we meet a young witch, as she learns her craft and figures out who she is in this world.
I read that book as an adult and I was like, man, I'm so mad I didn't find this when I was a kid.
I'm
so mad. I would have loved this so much.
I had the same experience, and Granny appears in those books as a mentor to Tiffany.
Yes.
Yeah.
That actually segues into a question from one of our listeners on our Discord, talking about how Terry's written so many Discworld novels with their own sub-series. A couple of them, start with the witches going into the Tiffany Aching books, and that's kind of the end of that series and the wrap-up, while others kind of had vague endings. Does your favorite Discworld series have an ending, and would you like to, had he not passed, for Terry to continue that thread of the witches?
So the witches, I think they're the only ones that do have an ending, because they are the book of his that was published posthumously.
Okay,
that's the one.
That's the one.
And I think the last book, the last Tiffany Aching book, and the last book that was published, it's called The Shepherd's Crown. And I think here in the last like 3 or 4 of Terry's books, his Alzheimer's was claiming him, and he knew it. He knew this for like more than a decade. He lived with his disease forever and had a very peculiar. I forget the exact name for it, but a strand or breed of Alzheimer's, where, as he described it, his memories and what have you were intact, but the physical world around him was not. So his cup of coffee would vanish or suddenly not be there or not have been there, or he would talk about like he had a system for the days when he couldn't put his pants on the right way, where eventually what he would do is just take them off, leave them on the ground, walk around them, and put them on that way, because it's the only way he could interact with them to get them on properly.
Yeah. Wow, he had to like reset, basically.
Yeah. He was, so he was deep in his Alzheimer's by the time his last few books, and you can sort of read the levity leaving, and there's a certain sorrow and a certain goodbye or a nostalgia or a darkness that kind of creeps in. Not a darkness, a sentimentality, a very heavy sentimentality.
Yeah.
And so the events of The Shepherd's Crown, no spoilers, do reflect that, know? And I think for that reason, it felt like a goodbye letter to Tiffany, to Granny, to the world, to his readers,
Wow.
And so it's the first book, I think it's the only book where almost every character from all of the series is at least mentioned, even if it's just like a little glimmer of a thing. And so I think he knew he was on the way out, And so all that to say, mine did get an ending.
Okay.
That being said, speaking to some of the ones that did not get an ending, the books were standalones, and he was very clear about that. So there was nothing incomplete about it, So like in the Sam Vimes series, we watch him go from like alcoholic bachelor to, family man father kind of thing. And we sort of witness this happening in stages and chapters, and periods. So even though, we could, we end with Sam Vimes as the father of a toddler kind of thing, And sure, we could then jump to him as a teenager, him as an empty nester, him as a whatever. It doesn't feel incomplete, though. We get to see it in the whole in these individual pieces. So I don't know how or if I would change it.
That's awesome. Also, very emotional.
Yeah.
I'm feeling like welling up over here.
Oh, I know. Here, I'm like trying to swallow my uvula.
Okay, people have cried on the podcast before, including us.
I just listened to the Sondheim episode,
so you heard us all be like, oh god.
Yeah.
That sounds really beautiful and emotional and so rare too, as a fan of something, to get closure on it in a strange way. Like today, I was listening to a playlist that happened to have a song from David Bowie's Black Star on it, and that's another one of those pieces of art where David Bowie composed it on his deathbed.
Yeah, he knew he was departing.
That's right. God. He literally knew. And it's so rare, I think, to have an artist who is unbelievable and has this massive body of work and the skill to be able to deliver what they're going through. Like, that's so rare.
You know about his death tweets, right?
No.
Oh, okay, buckle up. Are you ready?
Am I gonna cry?
Yes.
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm already crying, so shut up. So in the Discworld, the only character that shows up in every book is Death. And his death, it's like straight up Grim Reaper, Scythe, Black Cloak, and he writes Death's dialogue in large Gothic bold print kind of thing.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's like, and you read it, and you can hear the voice. You can kind of hear this voice of death coming through. So he had, I assume, his daughter Rihanna, who is now the proprietor of his estate, and sort of any Discworld stuff goes through Rihanna Pratchett, and she's very, from what I can tell, protective of her father's legacy.
Good.
And she's brilliant. I love her. She's a video game writer. I'm a big fan of Rihanna Pratchett independently. She's fantastic. All this to say, that I assume she was the one who made the post, but he composed tweets to go out after he had died. And it was, in the Discworld, a character dies and Death shows up, usually says something kind of quirky as they all realize they're dead, and then they walk out over a desert of black sand, and it always kind of ends, it's always with well, what comes next? And Death's answer is usually, well, you got to find out. Go, And And then his tweet, I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm not going to get it right, but it was like, and at last Sir Terry took, greeted death as a friend and walked with him across the black desert. The end.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
A moment of silence. Wow.
I found out Terry had passed on my way to, I was studying musical theater at the time, and I was on my way to a voice lesson. And I saw this, found out, did a Google, landed on the tweets, was sobbing on the way there, and got to my lesson going, I can't sing today. Here's your money. Goodbye.
Sometimes it just hits you and there's no getting past that.
Oh, yeah, it was hard.
Yeah. It's like real mourning for someone you spent a lot of time with.
Yeah.
A lot of time.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful, though.
It really was, and I can just picture him like writing these tweets, and I'm sure there was like a genuine sentiment, but I bet there was also a
I'm gonna get you all. You're all gonna cry at this.
Exactly.
Just like laughing to himself. Does death have a voice to you? Like, is there an actor's voice that you?
Yes, Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee. Okay,
Yeah,
I've seen other people say that as well. Like, I love that.
It's
completely
gotta be.
tracks.
Yeah.
Completely
So
tracks.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, we talk about Discworld a lot. It has a massive number of books, but a lot of people might not, other than knowing that there's, a world on top of a turtle, know much about it. Can you, describe what Discworld is?
Yeah, Discworld is the canvas where Terry got to paint whatever he wanted and extrapolate a world as he went, And it all starts with Ankh-Morpork, which is this independent city-state that is notoriously a fantastical hybrid of modern day New York and Victorian London. And so he describes it as this, this bustling, amazing city that stinks of sewage and where everyone is grouchy and terrible,
Sounds like both
city
those
living.
places. Yeah.
Look, he straight up got it's New York vibes in English clothes, is sort of how I feel it.
Yep.
So it started with Ankh-Morpork. From there, we ended up with Lancre, which is more of a parochial England, and the countryside, the rural England that I think Terry grew up in. And that's where we meet the witches, And so we got our city folk, we got our country folk. And then anywhere else beyond those places sort of gets one-off little mentions,
Right.
there's the triple X continent, which is Australia, and it's just called XXX and is pronounced as such, and
Incredible.
Yeah. And he'll vaguely mention, Hawanda Land and these other places that sort of, or the Agatian Empire, all of which are based on different, real places and historical period. The Agatian Empire is definitely Imperial Japan, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But mostly we're in Ankh-Morpork or we're in Lancre, and that's kind of what was the question? I got very caught up in geography.
Just describing the setting of this world.
Yeah, we got that, and then we have, he took a world and said, yes, I'm going to fill it with magic, and I'm going to fill it with these fantastical, incredible things, and I'm going to make everyone so real and so kind of I don't know, downtrodden in the way that people, this sounds so pessimistic, but in the way that real life people are downtrodden.
Yeah.
We walk through our world and nothing's fantastical, everything's normal. These people, magic's everywhere. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's so okay, well, no, I'm thinking about my paycheck. Why are you,
Beside a beautiful waterfall every day, you're not going to be like, wow, that waterfall is beautiful. You're going to be like, I fucking spray off with this motherfucking thing. Again, I'm wet.
And he talks about that, this idea that the, humans have this way of filtering out things that are amazing because otherwise we'd be overwhelmed all the time.
Oh, that's absolutely so true.
Yeah, it is. If we sat there and really considered the planet, the cycles of the earth, the minutia of how everything functions and the beauty and balance and perfection of how our singular little planet came into being, we'd be stunned.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
if you went back to the medieval ages and showed them the internet, they would be like, this is either God or witchcraft. It's one of the two.
Truly.
It's either a miracle or it's the devil
Yeah.
for sure. And we're like, oh, the internet, am I right?
Friggin' X. They're like, what is an X? What is an X?
What is this witchcraft?
What
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, right. I forgot we renamed it.
And you know
No,
what?
you're-
Stay there.
Yeah,
Stay in that place.
It's Twitter in my heart. Also, I don't have it anymore, so that's
Good.
fine.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I have
the best.
also deleted. Okay, so with Terry, it's it's kind of like history and geography painted over with this beautiful magical realm. How has reading Terry Pratchett kind of impacted your view of the world? Like, does it help you see more magic in the world? Does it like allow you to see things more humorously? How has it impacted you?
Yeah, the thing that strikes me most, or that I think stays with me, is the ethics of Terry. He had this way of, boiling down right and wrong, and I mentioned that his witches were sort of the stewards of their communities, and I think in some ways I try to emulate or embody the sense of responsibility that the witches have in the way that they deal with people, and like he there are just certain little things, like there's a difference between what's personal and what's important, and like little like quippy pithy things like this that I think are so. Oh yeah, like one of my favorite. I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, here's the thing. When you're delving into something that has like impacted your life so greatly, it's so hard to summarize like how has this changed you? It's like, a million little ways.
A million little ways.
Right?
And that's it. Like like taking Granny Weatherwax as an example, because she's who I want to be when I grow up, like she's so grouchy and she's so nasty. There's a quote about her where one of the other witches is talking about how fucking mean she is all the time, etc. And like Nanny Og, her longest friend, says, oh well, she'll never do you a bad turn if she can do you a good one. And the other one who's been bitching about her says like, oh, I'm not saying she's not basically a nice person. And Nanny Og says, oh, I am. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody nastier than Esme, but she'll do good by you, kind of thing. You know, and there's this separation of nice versus good versus kind versus right.
Yes.
And I'm like, nice is frivolous. Kind, good, and right. These are the things we should be concerned with, And
that's very real.
It's very real, and like also because I'm a grouchy person, and so it's kind of like he kind of gave me permission to go like some days I'm grouchy, and it is my obligation to be a good person in spite of that. I don't always have to be a nice person. That's allowed,
Yeah, absolutely.
And just sort of like figuring out where you can channel your energy in a day that you're still being like a responsible citizen of the world with a sense of community and a sense of what we owe our fellow humans,
Yeah. I
love that.
I love it so much. I'm finding this because we did a previous episode on Ursula K. Le Guin, and as our listeners will know, I've been mildly obsessed ever since, and I won't stop talking about it. But also a very humanist author, and I'm finding this thing about reading humanist authors is it really pulls away that sense of good and evil into a place of right and wrong, which is so much more complicated and gray, and so much more comforting, I find.
I agree. And actually, speaking of this idea of like right and wrong and shades of gray and what have you, there's if I may bring you through a scene,
Bring along, please.
There's a moment Granny Weatherwax, the witch, is in the company of an Omnian minister who is a young man trying desperately to fulfill his position and only like staggering along, and his religion doesn't like witches historically. They're better about it now, but this was a thing. And so he's sort of he's okay with Granny. Granny's not so okay with him. She's, but he's helping her along on this journey. Like her body is feeble due to circumstances of the book. And they stop as it's raining. They light a fire. They're talking and about good and evil and what have you. And she's, basically grilling him about his religion and the ethics of his religion. And, she says to him, and sin, young man, is when you start to think of people as things. And he kind of comes in with no, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. There are shades of gray. And she says, there's no gray. There's just white that got mucky. And that's a thing I think about, not because I necessarily agree with that statement as a whole, because there are gray areas and there are difficulties, but I think it does ask the question of, okay, how much am I how much bad or how much wrong am I excusing because I decided it's complicated when, like, I can say, no, this thing that I did, even though it, like, yes, there are reasons I did it and it's not inherently evil, is still wrong. You know, like, it forces you to kind of parse out the bits that got mucky, you know, is sort of how I think of it. And,
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, now that we're on the subject of questionable ethics.
Yes.
Things being mucky.
Yeah, I think perhaps now is the right time to move into the Neil Gaiman of it all.
Oh, yes.
So what are your thoughts on that? Because you have a particular take on this.
Well, let's just give some context.
Yes, you're right. That's important.
So these two authors collaborated, but Neil Gaiman, if you do not know, a quick Google will let you know that he's been accused of sexual assault of numerous people.
Quite recently
that have come forward, and therefore, you know.
And without getting too graphic about it, like, of a particularly vile and manipulative disposition.
Yeah. It's bad stuff. It's inexcusable stuff.
Yeah.
It's the kind of stuff that makes you remove a bunch of books from your bookshelf.
Yeah. And a lot of people, you know, especially researching for this episode, a lot of people are like, how can you separate, like, if Terry was so close with him, he must have known this was going on. There must have been something there. So would love to hear your take on the intertwinedness of these two men.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's my thing. I think a couple of things. I would stake my left arm that Terry didn't know, and maybe that's just me protecting the man that I love so much. But I'm like, nah, Terry was so verbal and antagonistic of people. You like, there's just like, so that's my first thing.
It seems like he wouldn't suffer this shit.
No, and also I don't think they were as close as Neil Gaiman. Which one is it? Anyway?
I have literally never gotten it right.
I don't know.
Once.
Like, anyway, so let's just change it up as we go. Like,
that dude.
That
like
Neil G.
I don't think they were as close as he wants to think, because Terry wrote 3,000, 4,000 words a day for decades on end. He was putting out 2 books a year for most of his life.
Which is unbelievable.
Is insane. He didn't have time for friends.
It sounds like he didn't really want many of them.
Exactly. No, he was a grouchy man, you know. And I've noticed this thing where we can find a lot of material of Neil talking about Terry, and not a lot of material about Terry talking about Neil.
Interesting.
And the other, like, again, this is me like collecting gossip and hearsay and like small bits of what I'm labeling evidence and going, no, Terry didn't know. Terry didn't know. You know.
But also, that is as right as the theory that he did. You know, we don't know.
We don't know. And then the other thing, getting into the good omens of it all. Here's how good omens happen. Neil started a story, and he wanted some feedback on it, and he sent it around. Terry was one of the people he sent it around to. Terry rings up Neil and says, "So listen, you got 2 options. I know how this story ends. So either you can sell it to me, or we can work on it together."
Oh my God, that's incredible.
And
oh my God.
Neil chose the latter.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? And this was before Terry Pratchett was Terry Pratchett. You know, he was before he was the huge deal he was now. Good Omens was very early in their career, and actually one of the things that like, I think I read this in Terry's bio, the one that was published posthumously by like his like personal assistant of decades on end, was that Terry didn't know much about how professional writing worked at that time, and so through Good Omens learned, like, I should be getting more money and I should be getting it up front, you know?
That is very endearing.
It is. But all this to say that, like, so Terry wrote this story. Terry says he wrote most of it. Neil has said Terry has written most of it.
So Terry wrote most of it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and as somebody who has read both of their writings multiple times each, Terry wrote that book.
Yeah.
Anything that's, like, sexy or scary, Neil threw it in there.
Yeah.
Anything that is heartbreaking or observant or intelligent
Most of the book.
Yep.
Is Terry. You know? Neil wrote the scene where the maggots come out of the phone. Terry wrote the rest.
Right.
Oh, bless.
Yeah.
Bless.
So
the part that feels the most Neil Gaiman to me is the part with the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, where each of them is their own like metaphor for whatever is going on in our world. I'm like, so that's American Gods. That's you getting ahead of American Gods, and that's the only part.
You're so right. You're so right. Like, even the like Neil has said, like, oh yeah, Terry would take apart, read it, and send it back to me 16% funnier kind of thing.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And like moments like there, I think it's the like the delivery service worker, talks about like, having a romantic, like, evening by a river with the woman who would become his wife, and said, it reads like, where they had once spooned, and then Terry inserted, and on one very memorable occasion, forked.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Damn it, that's good.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the most iconic stuff like the Queen, the CD.
I was just going to say this cassette tape of
that's
Queen.
Constantly the best of Queen.
Yeah.
And like that feels like it's Terry Pratchett all over.
That's like, can't confirm, but like feels like it to me too.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And,
okay, so we think that potentially they were not as close as one would think writing a book together.
Is my feeling, or is my that like based on what's in front of us, I think one of these was a fanboy who thought the other was his friend, and the other, I should also say I have no reason to think that Terry thought poorly of Neil. I just don't think they were as close. I don't think they were hanging out together all the time. You know, and I don't know if. I don't know if Neil would have taken enough interest in. I don't know if Terry would have taken enough interest in Neil's life to know what was going on. I also think they led very different lives, where it feels like like Neil has still an impressive output of novels, but nowhere near what Terry was doing. So he was filling his time with other things, whereas Terry lived in the office, which was a separate building on his property that he called the chapel, writing day in day
wearing
out.
His hat, wearing that hat.
Wearing that hat.
Really wearing the hell out of that
Every
hat.
photo's got the hat.
I love it.
And actually, you know what? Since we're talking about the hat, he had talked about how there would be there would be moments, signings, whatever, where people would come up to him, ask for a photo, and say, "Could you put the hat on?" And he would say, his sort of response to this was, "I think people think the hat is more me than I am." Was kind of the sentiment. Like, it feels like he wore the hat a few times, and then other people decided, "You need the hat, or you're not Terry Pratchett."
Oh my God.
Honestly, great. You know, get your costume on. I love that for you.
It's so good.
His witch's hat. All right, so we do have a little mini game for you.
I'm so excited.
So I've got a bunch of Terry Pratchett novels here, and I would love for you, I'm going to give you the title, and you give me like a 3-word sales pitch for the novel.
Oh, you are trying me. Let's do this.
We're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. Okay.
It could be less than 3 words if you feel like you can get it in one.
But I can't. Okay, I'll try.
Yeah,
I'll do
just
my best.
maximum.
Maximum. 3. Night Watch.
Time travel trauma.
Love it. Nation.
Beautiful colonialism. Bear with me.
No, I've read that one. That one tracks. That one tracks.
Thank you.
Small Gods.
I feel like I need to just have this on record.
We'll cycle back to that one.
Like, not at all pro-colonialism. He just took a story about heartbreaking colonialism and found beauty in it. The end. Like,
yeah. No, that's a very good description of it.
Thank you. Please go. Please.
Small Gods.
Turtle Jesus.
I don't know how to pronounce this, but I'm going to hack it anyway. The Bromeliad trilogy? Truckers, Diggers, and Wings?
I have not read the Bromeliad trilogy.
Have not read.
Have not read. No, that's a for young readers one that I never really got around to, but that I've heard very good things about.
And look, now you have more. You have more to find.
And here's the thing, though, is I'm rationing it. I'm going to wait till I'm pretty sure I'm on my deathbed so that there's always some new Terry kind of hovering in the periphery.
Genuinely genius. That's a very smart thing to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Monstrous Regiment.
Ooh. Creature feature feminism.
Oh, you're really selling these.
Okay. The Color of Magic.
Ooh, silly wizard space.
I like the luggage in that one.
Oh yeah, I mean, the luggage returning to the fact that you and I have played Dungeons and Dragons together. The luggage emerged out of a Terry run D&D campaign.
What?
Yeah, he put this in a game he was running.
Imagine him as a DM. Oh my god.
Can you?
Oh my god. If I had to pick one person in the whole world to be a DM.
For real, like fucking spare me, you know?
Because these novels read like D&D games.
Oh, and he, like, I mean, even his wizards, he's mocking the Vancian D&D system of magic straight up, you know?
Wait, really?
Absolutely. Like, there's moments of, you know, him talking about, like, how they cast, like, 9 spells. And they're like, I'm tired. That's all I got. You know? Or like them reading, like, 'cause, like, canonically, at least in, like, 3rd edition D&D, this is my other fixation. Like, you know, like, a spell is 1 page long for every level it takes to cast, for every level of the spell that it is, you know? So, like, a 2nd level spell is 2 pages, you know?
Yeah. Right.
And yet, it has to be something that can be cast in 6 seconds or less. So there's a moment in, I think, Guards where he like a person has like purloined a book, reads through it, you know, for this spell to summon a dragon, and is like, I read 30 pages only for them to tell me, okay, yeah, and then the 8 words that you need are this. And I'm like, that's him calling out D&D. That's what it is, you know?
I love when you can tell your favorite creators are nerds. Yeah, I love it so much. It's
so
the best. Okay,
All
back
right.
to the game.
Guards.
Oh, guards. Alcoholic Watchman Dragon.
Weird
Incredible.
Sisters.
I've kind of used this one already, but Golden Girls Macbeth.
Yes.
Still terrific. Good Omens.
Oh, Do Me Crowley? I don't know.
End of the world besties.
Let's do
Yeah,
that one.
I would say Heaven and Hell fan fiction.
Yes, that is
Sorry,
correct.
slash fiction.
Slash
very
fiction. Be
specifically.
specific.
Gotta be specific.
Carpe Jugulum.
Oh, it's so hard because this one's one of my favorites.
Oh, you don't want to do it dirty, too. Like,
Those are the hardest ones to summarize, no question.
Oh, truly. Witchy Identity Crisis.
Oh, I love.
Like,
Who wouldn't want to read that?
It's about vampires, but that's not the good part, you know?
Oh, yeah, love it. Okay, Mort.
Death Train's Apprentice.
Moving Pictures.
Ooh, Eldritch Hollywood.
Oh, these all sound so good.
the carpet people.
Tiny.
Oh, Hogfather.
Oh, Death Does Christmas.
The Light Fantastic. Oh wait, did you say that one already? No, okay.
Oh, that one's hard because it's kind of the back half of The Color of Magic. Like they really are like they're 2 books, but they're 1 book really. You know, it's the only 2 that like the rest of the books you can read as independents. You can't read The Light Fantastic as an independent. So I'm gonna go with Silly Wizard, but more.
That is such a unique thing about Discworld too. The independent like stories, the one-off stories. Because if you look at another long series like Wheel of Time, it's like good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Of the wind.
There's like 17 of them, and you gotta start at the beginning.
You fucked up.
It barely makes sense when you do read them.
And like I so respect Terry for deciding like I'm not gonna force people to commit that hard. They can come and
Bless
go. I don't
you.
care.
Yeah, that's such a casual approach, and I love it very much.
Right, Reaper Man.
Ooh, Death Gets Job.
A Hat Full of Sky.
Oh, Cranky Little Girl.
Thud.
Dwarf Chess Mystery.
And last but not least, Going Postal.
Oh,
Death Gets Mail.
you
Just an
think
assumption.
no, there's like honestly that tracks so much.
Honestly, Death just doing mundane things and like getting groceries. I would read
every
it.
book.
No, Industrial Mail Race.
Love it.
Incredible.
This was a good game. Thank you for doing this. Thank you.
The hope is that it's fun for you, fun for you as it is for us.
I mean, listen, I did, like, my hairs are turning white, but I liked it.
Right. Before we start to wrap up, is there any last thing about Terry Pratchett that you need to get out into the world?
Your hot takes.
There was something somebody just said about you know what? Screw whatever that was, because something better comes to mind. Let's talk about how Terry met his wife.
Yes, please.
It's stupid. You can't write this shit. So Terry was a Tolkien fan, as one might imagine, and when he was reading it he read it as a young man, was obsessed, and he used to commute from whatever village he lived in into, I think, London, or at least like a larger place for work every day. You know, I think this was while he was working as a journalist. And on the train one day, he saw a gorgeous woman reading The Lord of the Rings. And he was like, oh, I should talk to her. And he sat there and thought that for 40 minutes until she got off the train.
Oh, no.
Incredibly cute. Go on.
Cut to Terry at a party of some mutual friend. And he's a little drunk. And a lady who's a little drunk comes and sits in his lap. And it's the woman from the train.
No.
And she says, are you insert name of like musician here? And he says, no. And she says, oh, okay, and gets up and walks away. And oh gods, I'm gonna miss the details. Read Terry's bio, it's in there. But there was an object that she dropped or left behind or something. And he used this because he was like, oh, again, I'll never get a third chance, and then found this, I don't know, earring or something a glove, I forget, that needed to be returned, and he goes to the friend who organized the party and was like, I need to return this to so-and-so. Can you get in touch with her and the friend was like, well, I can give it to, well, no, I think I should give it to you, and he like goes and like, establishes a date with this woman. He had no money at the time, but she came from a fairly well-to-do family, and of course British classism.
Yep, that's very real.
So he didn't want to let her know. So for their date, he rode his scooter like several hours and like through dusty terrain. So wearing one outfit with his nice clothes in a bag, and he went there, hid the scooter, got his nice clothes on, called a cab to the house to make it look, or like had organized in advance before cell phones for a cab to be at the house so it looked like Terry had taken a cab.
Oh
my God. Like used the cab, took her to I think a Thai restaurant, question mark. Like he was trying to look for, cuisine, things that she, for this rich girl he wanted to take out, like goes, has a lovely day, drops her back off, and then has to go get his scooter, which gave out, and he had to trudge home in the rain.
No.
But they married and were in love for decades on end, and produced a child that it looks like they just loved with all their hearts.
That's so nice.
So that's all. Just like we need to know the Terry Pratchett love story. That's the one thing I'd like to peg on there.
That is Lord of the Rings, helping people fall in love since forever.
It's true. Can confirm.
Can confirm.
Can confirm. Oh. Where would we be if you didn't have Hobbit tattoos?
Look, Kaya, we can't talk about it. I might be thought of as straight. Anyway. Ew.
Don't say that.
I'm sorry. Bad words. At the end of every episode, we like to share our micro fandoms of the week, which we're going to do in just a minute. But before we do, here's some ways you can connect in with us. As we mentioned off the top, the show is going to be free forever. But you can show your support in many different ways, including joining our Patreon page at patreon.com/The Fandom Show. You can get episodes early, submit questions, enjoy the Nerds Letter, listen to our Patreon exclusive podcast, The Fan Club. You can also find us on social media at Fandom Show Pod or over at our website at thefandomshow.com.
Please do us the greatest of favors.
The
very greatest of favors. And tell all of your nerdiest friends about us. While you're at it, tell your regular friends. It really, really helps spread the word. That's the fastest way people learn about podcasts. And the more people that listen to our show, the more people we can spread this wonderful nerdy joy with. So if you can go on whatever platform that you use to listen to podcasts and do a little rate, review, subscribe, even a one sentence or one word review really, really helps. Tell us your favorite Terry Pratchett book or the one that sounds the best based on our descriptions. That on its own would still make it so much easier for people to find us, and we can have more fans of fans, which is the dream. You can also find us on the From Superheroes Discord, where you can meet other fans or hit us up directly.
And now for a micro fandoms of the week, starting with Kaya.
This one is going to be the coldest of takes because the Oscar just happened. The Oscars. There's multiple.
The
just
single
happened.
Oscar.
The one Oscar, honestly, shorter ceremony.
I was just going to say, maybe one's the way to go.
Maybe one would do it. Yeah. Just do a bit of a song and dance, hand one out, and then let's go home.
Like, we pick one category that we think needs mentioning. Not everything needs to be recognized every year.
Yeah.
You know?
They are very fun pageantry, though, and if you want to hear more about that, you can listen to the Oscars episode we just dropped. But I made an effort to watch some of the Oscar movies this year, and Anora won Best Picture, and I think it really deserved it. I loved it. It was such a wonderful story. It was a tricky story to tell, and they told it incredibly well. I think Sean Baker's an incredible filmmaker, and I'm very excited to watch more of his stuff. So again, not a hot take. Everybody's on board with this right now. But if you haven't seen Anora, really go watch it. It was a well-deserved Best Picture, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I don't even normally like a lot of Oscar stuff, as you will find out on the Oscars episode if you haven't listened to it. But I truly, truly enjoyed that movie. I thought it was so fun. It was so heartfelt.
Yep.
It was
clever.
It was clever. It was silly. It was a buddy cop movie, almost like a buddy adventure, but also like, I don't know.
Absurdist comedy on top of a drama about sex workers. It was a
great time.
A deftly created movie, and I highly recommend you watch it.
Check it out. Check it out.
Steph, what are you loving right now?
Oh, I'm a little ashamed of this, but not fully ashamed of it, because I don't think you should ever be ashamed of the things that you love or that you're enjoying. This started, I was watching a clip of John Oliver on Colbert talking about his favorite TV shows. And he said one TV show, and I don't remember what that was. And then he said his second favorite TV show that he can't stop watching is The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And I was like, lol, what? And he was like, yeah, it's so endlessly entertaining. And I could talk for an hour about it and tell you the reasons why I think all these women are going to jail. And I was like, you know what? Honestly, I'm interested. You've sold me. So obviously, if you've listened to a while, you know I enjoyed Vanderpump Rules a lot. So I thought, if I'm going to start The Real Housewives, I have to start at the beginning with Beverly Hills, because it also has the tie into Vanderpump with Lisa Vanderpump. So I started watching The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills recently. And I could probably tell you which of these women are going to end up in jail at some point.
Is it all of them?
Maybe. It's fascinating. I'm not a person who watches wealth with a covetous energy. I kind of am like, it's nice to have money, but y'all are fucked up.
It mostly seems like it makes people stupid.
Makes people stupid.
I know there are smart rich people out there. Not all rich people.
But mean and catty. And if I were to hang out with my friends like this, they wouldn't be my friends. But it's such fun television.
Yeah.
It's messy, messy women being messy at each other. Kelsey Grammer's wife is on the first one. She's on the second one too now. I don't know how long she stays on, but he's messy. Everyone's messy, but they're also wearing hideous clothes that they're like, this is the most expensive thing. I'm like, it's disgusting. You look bad. You look terrible.
Because it also would have been in the mid-aughts, right? Where
2011 is when it starts.
We collectively as a society made a lot of bad decisions really fast.
Absolutely. So it's a time capsule. It's a view into a world that sometimes people want to be in, and I desperately don't. So it's fun to watch from afar and go, wow, it's like going to a zoo. And you're like, huh, that's what an otter does. That's The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So that's what I've been into right now. All right. Head on over. Brett, what are you thinking about? What are you loving?
I mean, now I'm thinking about Terry Pratchett's philosophies and ideas around wealth. Which is a whole other thing. I'll leave it as he differentiated vertically wealthy, the bad kind of wealthy, from horizontally wealthy, the kind of wealthy where you just had money and stayed yourself kind of thing, But
that is such a good way to put it, and that is such a difference. You can really tell when those two categories.
Oh yeah, and he seemed to think that the epitome of vertically wealthy was skiing in the Alps. That was his you only do this if you're rotten to the core.
You don't belong up there. That's not for you.
You're fake. You don't like this. You just think you have to do it.
Literally, they're going on a ski trip right now where I'm watching. They're all going on a ski trip.
Vertically wealthy.
Sorry, you said Beverly Hills is the
I'm
one
watching Beverly Hills right now.
Okay, I did a tarot reading for one of the Real Housewives of New York.
What?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'm terrible at reality TV and at pop culture. Her name was Sonia. I don't remember her last name.
I wouldn't be the right person.
I wouldn't be the right person either.
Anyway, there's a speakeasy where I do readings, and she, because I make my living as a psychic and tarot reader, and she was great. She was a delight. So just whenever Real Housewives comes up, I'm like, this is the only time I've met a celebrity. I wish I had more appreciation for that because I don't know this person and I wasn't told who she was till after the fact. So
I love that though.
You know what? You might have made it a better experience for her because of that.
Oh, and I don't like to know who people are. Like that's my preference as a anyway, but that's not talking about the micro fixation. How did you cut
micro fandom?
Micro fandom, thank you. I'm loving there's a podcast called The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, which is if you're a D&D nerd, then you like live plays, then you know Brennan Lee Mulligan.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know
of course.
Abria Iyengar.
I was watching a video with him today.
Yeah, so it's Brennan Lee Mulligan, Abria Iyengar, Erica Ishii, and Lou Wilson.
Yes, I love Erica Ishii.
They're all fantastic. They're such besties. It really is that fantasy of like I'm in the room, I'm playing this game with you, and it is a Ghibli inspired D&D campaign where Brennan is DMing and then Abria is the wizard, Erica is the witch, and Lou is the wild one, this sort of like spirit entity. And it's delicious. It's beautiful storytelling. Can't recommend enough. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And those folks don't miss, eh?
They truly don't. Like I have to assume that they have garbage out there somewhere that they just knew to burn because this level or this like consistency of good material seems unrealistic to me, you know? So I'm like, where are you hiding the garbage? You know?
It's on live stages doing bad improv shows is where they've left that garbage.
Absolutely.
It's
where
ephemeral. It's gone
So
to the wind. But also it says something to finding your people who also love the things you love and just playing with each other and making the things that bring you joy. And other people who love those things will find you. Yeah. They'll all tap in because when you love something unabashedly, there's nothing but joy there.
Yeah, no pretension.
No pretension.
I love community.
I know, it's lovely. It's lovely.
Brett, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you, and what do you want to plug?
Oh my God! Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's such a joy. You can find me if you want me for a tarot reading. You can find me at on Instagram at tarot.brett, tarot.brett, TAROT.BRETT. And I just launched a podcast today. Yes, that's it. You know, we're going with it. We're having fun. It's called The Hexperts. You can find us on Instagram at The Hexperts.
Great title, by the way.
Thank you. I cannot take credit for that. That is entirely my platonic life partner and partner in crime, Nikki Haggart.
You could have just lied, though.
I could have.
Nikki's not here.
she's not here, but I live with her.
Oh, yeah, she'd find you.
She would know.
She knows where my bedroom is. She'll end me. Also, you know, like, here's the thing. I think it's so sad when people feel the need to take credit for a thing that isn't theirs, you know? So, like, no, Nikki's brilliance belongs to Nikki, and I ain't touching that. But
love it.
All that to say that, I'm a practicing witch, and I know a lot about magic and sorcery and folklore and occultism. So in these episodes, I will be talking about... different bits of witchcraft from, certain witch trials to which spells used pee in them. To,
of course. A thing that we're all clamoring to know, I think.
There's a lot of them.
Honestly?
I believe you.
Oh, yeah.
I believe you.
People love to piss in a jar for a spell. And it's such a thing. So, we're talking about, all the fun, silly stuff that I can find about witchcraft. And then at the end, Nikki poses a pop culture question my way and makes me explain. And you don't know me, or you might not know me, so that's not funny yet, but I will just leave you with the knowledge that I thought Liam Neeson starred in Die Hard, and that's where we're coming from. So
that's the level of knowledge we're working with.
Yeah, I also thought she was like, well, what is he, Nikki, when we had this discussion, Nikki's like beet red in the face laughing at me, and she's like, okay, but what's the sentence? What's the thing he says? And I'm there going, cowabunga bitches.
I mean, that's kind of spiritually.
It's not entirely wrong.
And I think that's the part is that most of the time I'm not entirely wrong. And
just off to the side.
I think what tickles people. So anyway, come. We would love to have y'all listen. And who doesn't love hearing about witchcraft? You know.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. Until next time, everyone. Love the things you love and tell everyone about them.
Bye.
I'm great. I'm doing great.
The Phantom Show.